Hello and welcome to my July wrap up. This month I ended up reading 12 books, but 2 are rereads, so I'm just going to talk about 10 that I did end up picking up. I had kind of a mixed bag when it came to reading. I participated in Summerween for the very first time, so I picked up genres outside of my comfort zone. Some were hits, some were misses, and yeah, there was a couple of hits and misses with my usual genre of like enjoying romance novels. Kind of some major misses in that category, if we're being honest. However, without further ado, I'm actually going to talk about one of my favorite books of the month. Not the favorite book of the month, which will make sense shortly thereafter when I actually speak about my favorite book of the month, but I did pick up The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst. I picked this up in anticipation of the new release Sea of Charms, which is book 3 in this cozy fantasy series that Sarah Beth Durst has been writing, and Sea of Charms is the one that I'm most anticipating just because I love books set on boats so much. So I really wanted to make sure that I was like caught up with the 2 releases before jumping into the 3rd book. It's been a minute though since I read the first book, which was The Spell Shop, and I didn't really remember too much of it. I knew there was a sentient spider plant named Kaz and another character. It was kind of cozy. That was all I really recalled from it, but I remember that I had a fun time. So that's the expectation I went into The Enchanted Greenhouse, and I had no idea what the premise was. I just knew that it was a cozy fantasy. And we open up this story with our main character going through some very, very traumatic events. Turlu was actually a person who made Kaz, the sentient plant that we met in book 1. However, magic is illegal unless you are like a qualified magician in this universe. And so, as punishment and to set an example, poor little Turlu gets turned into a stone statue and then shoved into storage for a few years before then being put on display in the library where she used to work. So people get to walk past her every day and see the consequences of the actions of doing illegal magic, which is actually insane because she didn't kill anyone, she didn't do anything crazy in terms of the magic. She just made a plant sentient so she would have a friend because she was lonely in the library where she worked. So already we're introduced to a very unfair justice system literally straight out the gates. And I was so taken aback because, again, I didn't really read the description before jumping into it. So I'm expecting, oh, cute, like they're in a little greenhouse, it's gonna be nice and cozy. And then Turlu just has like some trauma immediately that she goes through. However, she is then shipped off to an island and she wakes up on this island having no idea how she got there or who unspelled her. Turns out that Yarrow is a gardener that have been living on this island, and there is this massive, massive enchanted greenhouse, and he has been alone trying to like maintain this greenhouse, but he needed a magician. So they sent Turlu. We kind of learned later on like who sent her and what have you, so they kind of worked together to save the greenhouse. And like I said earlier, it was so much fun. I will say one of my biggest gripes at the beginning of this book was just how many questions were being asked, because obviously Turlu wakes up in this environment having no idea how she got there or what's going on, and Yarrow is giving her the biggest cold shoulder ever. Like, girl went through something so traumatic, finally is free from that, but still has a lot of lingering anxiety. And Yarrow is doing absolutely nothing to comfort her in the beginning. He's like, that's not my problem. I do not care. I'm not answering your questions. So there's just so many questions that Turlu is like constantly asking both Yarrow and herself. So pretty much we have no idea what's going on in the beginning because Yarrow gives no answers and Turlu has no idea what's going on. So that was a little bit of a gripe for me. Nothing to really like take me out of the story too much, but it definitely was kind of annoying knowing nothing for so long. However, once the pieces started to get introduced and things started happening, I started to enjoy it a little bit more. And obviously we're supposed to be left in the dark because we are in the POV of Turlu, who, like I said, knows absolutely nothing about what's going on. I really enjoyed their slow growth in their romance because, again, when they first met, they both did not like one another, and Yarrow honestly just had a stick up his ass, if we're being honest. So it was really nice to see them kind of grow closer as Yarrow opened up a little bit more and shared different secrets of the greenhouse with Turlu. And just their slow romance. Yarrow has a lot of family issues, and then Turlu has a lot of like trust issues as well. So seeing them overcome that as they grow closer was just, it was cute. I really liked the characters. I really liked the environment. We had more sentient plants, and they honestly were the stars of the show. I loved them. There was like a little sentient rose. She was so cute, and I really, like I said, it was a fun time, and I cannot wait for Sea of Charms because we actually briefly got introduced to the characters that we'll be following in Sea of Charms, and I already like them, so excited to dive into that story. Hopefully this upcoming month, but I also want to read, I didn't even realize that Sarah Beth Durst had released a book at the beginning of this year. So if you've read, I think it's called The Faraway Inn, let me know if it's worth picking up. I know it's not within this series, but I still want to know if it's worth a read. The next book is an unfortunate dud, and that is How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang. Now, going into this book, I had adjusted my expectations because I had actually started this book previously and DNF'd it because I thought the concept was absolutely insane and there was no way I could get into the story. So I put it off, DNF'd it for a little bit, but my TBR jar picked this book out for me last month. So I thought, okay, why not go ahead, give it a read. And yeah, I should have kept this book as a DNF, and I should have DNF'd it again, if we're being honest, but I really wanted things to turn around. That was not the case. Now I'm about to discuss some sensitive topics, so if you want to skip forward a little bit, please feel free. This book does definitely deal with like heavier topics. Helen has sold the rights to one of her best-selling novels, and they bring on a screenwriter to develop the story, and it is Grant. Now, how they know each other is absolutely insane. So they went to high school together, but Helen's sister back in high school was severely depressed and jumped in front of Grant's car. So obviously Grant didn't like straight up kill her. Obviously it was an accident and he has a lot of trauma from that, but neither character understands the trauma that they went through, and they are not coping in healthy ways either when they are finally like reunited, because again, Helen really, really hates Grant and blames him for everything. I understand that grief is illogical in that way. The premise of this book is just a little too out of this world to even be good, because they never actually have any conversations where they kind of come to a realization of, okay, like we both went through things, and you know, it was many, many years ago and we're able to move on, move past that. But I can't even imagine this romance even working in the sense of even like Helen's family doesn't like Grant. So how are we getting over such a huge road bump and like issue between these two characters other than them just immediately having sex pretty much, or like immediately lusting after one another? They didn't really develop or have deep conversations and grow together as characters. They pretty much just had sex the entire time. That's all well and good, but again, I think this is the one situation, well, maybe not the one situation, but this is definitely a situation where you guys need to work through some issues and have the conversations and have the hard conversations that you don't want to have. Every time it was mentioned or every time I thought about it, I just could not get over the fact of like, that was how they met in high school. And it's just not, crazy premise. I didn't like it, guys. I did not enjoy it at all. And then most of like the movie scenes and things like that I was excited to see when like she was in the screenwriter room and like the behind the scenes, I just kept getting really like secondhand embarrassment for Helen, which again really was taking me out of the story. So definitely not a favorite romance book of mine, but at least now I've read it and I learned my lesson that maybe if I DNF a book in the beginning because it's absolutely wild, it might not turn around. So we might not be able to end a love story. However, How to Write a Love Story by Catherine Walsh was an absolute delight. This book came across my radar because I really liked the premise. So we have Sierra, whose late father had this massive fantasy series, think Wheel of Time, think Stormlight Archive, very, very popular, very well beloved, but he passed away before he could finish the 10th and final book. So Sierra wants to kind of finish laying out the story and finish the series, and Sam is the editor on that series, and he's assigned to basically go help Sierra get out of her little bit of a rut, little bit of a writing block. And it takes place in Ireland, which I think was also like a really fun environment to have these characters in. However, going into it, I knew that Catherine Walsh's name sounded familiar, but I could not pinpoint what other books I had read from her, thinking that I hadn't read anything else by her, but I did. I read Holiday Romance and Snowed In last December, and they were some of like my favorite romances of the year. Once again, Catherine Walsh had quite the hit. I actually ended up buying this book. That's how much that I enjoyed it. I obviously loved the kind of literary setting of a writer and an editor and them kind of working together. At one point, they actually like temporarily move in together because like Sam lives in the States, so he flew over to Ireland to help her. There's like a situation with his housing, so they ended up kind of of the forced proximity moments. I really, really loved the character development, both separately as individuals and with them together, and that slow, tantalizing build of slowly growing together. Sierra had so many walls up, and to see them slowly come down and for her to let Sam in and to also show Sam parts of the story and where her dad like gathered inspiration, because Sam also is like a mega fan of the series. So, you know, deep in his heart, he's definitely a fanboy, but he also needs to remain professional and like help with the story and steer it in the right direction without kind of imbuing too much of his own opinions and thoughts and what he wants things to happen to be. But I loved getting to see their romance slowly build. In one scene when they were making out, Sierra basically was trying to write like a love scene, and she was like, I don't know, I don't pay attention while these events are happening to me to know like, oh, where they place their hands and like what's going on. And then they basically end up doing research together. And it was so funny. Like, there were so many really, really cute moments. I love the small town vibe as well. And I really, really hope that Catherine Walsh continues to write about the characters in this book, because there was also some side characters that I think were like set up for future novels that I really, really enjoyed. So I cannot wait to see them hopefully get their own storyline, because I love the supportive best friend side role, and I love them reading future novels with them as the feature. So definitely better than how to end a love story was how to write a love story. We are now going to move on to my favorite book of the month, which is, of course, to no one's surprise, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This was my first time ever reading Lord of the Rings, which is honestly a crime, especially with how much I love fantasy. However, I was listening to the audiobook of this while I was drawing the map of Middle-earth. The experience of being immersed in this audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis and then drawing the map of Middle-earth, I literally felt so transported into this universe. I love a good adventure novel, and this is like the adventure novel at its peak, at its truest form. I personally loved comparing the book to the movies because I love both forms so much, and seeing these subtle differences or the major changes like Tom Bombadil was honestly really fun. Not Tom Bombadil, okay? We don't like Tom Bombadil, unfortunately. If you are a solid Tom Bombadil defender, good on you. He just was not the character for me, you guys. He was like, it wasn't even the character that was the problem. It was just all the singing that Andy Serkis was doing to, I think, the best of his abilities. But again, I harked on that a lot in my reading vlog, so we'll move on from the Tom Bombadil complaining, shall we? I truly love Tolkien's writing style. We got to see a little bit of it when I read The Hobbit a couple years ago, but getting to actually read his magnum opus series and to experience his writing, it's just gorgeous. Like, the way he describes things is so immersive, and I cannot wait to see these characters develop and grow. And oh my gosh, guys, it was so good. I'm so excited to pick up The Two Towers, even though I heard that one's most people's least favorite just because it's a little bit slower. A lot less things happen in that book. However, very keen to be picking up the later books in the series because of how much I loved the first one. Another romance book that I picked up that I actually was really excited to pick up was Toe to Toe by Fallon Ballard. This book was actually so bad, and I really should have DNF'd it straight away, because some of the lines that are written in this book are literally batshit crazy. I once again am going to be talking about some sensitive topics, so if that's not something that you want to hear, you absolutely can skip forward once again. But our main character is a ballerina, and in the dance industry, especially in ballet, there is a lot of focus on body image, on dieting, that sort of thing. And also, on top of all of that, there is kind of a history of abuse in the industry as well. Obviously, a lot has changed as we have moved into the, 21st century, if you will. However, how ballerinas are treated, especially women ballerinas, are definitely not the greatest, and there's always horror stories coming out of the industry across all sports, honestly, like gymnastic, anywhere where females are involved. Unfortunately, there's always signs of abuse. And straight away, there was a line, and I'm gonna roughly quote it because I can't exactly remember what it was. It was basically like, I'm not gonna let a little bit of sexual assault stop me from pursuing my dreams, essentially, because if I were to do that, like, no ballet organization would even exist. Which is honestly a wild line to have in a book. Allegra is actively being abused throughout this book, And the romance is with this guy named Cord, who used to be a trained ballerina in the industry, but his sister was also getting assaulted. He basically ends up getting fired due to some actions and words said. So he has a lot of trauma with being in the industry and being around ballerinas as well. And he is now an owner of a male performer entertainment space. So they say he's a stripper, but he's not a stripper. Like, they use it to describe him so much, and then on the same token be like, no, he's not a stripper. Cord is actively seeing Allegra go through this abuse and does nothing.
Editing Cass here. I also missed an important note that Allegra literally went to Cord and they made an agreement that Cord would teach her how to be more sexy for an audition for the role in the new ballet, because her director basically said she wasn't fit out for this role because she wasn't sexy enough, which is, again, insane behavior from all parties involved.
And I'm not saying that it's his responsibility to step up and like help her out of the situation, but it's just crazy to write a book where this is actively going on in the background and it's actively uncomfortable to read about, but the issues are never tackled. And then we get the epilogue and suddenly, oh, the sleazy director was fired and replaced with someone else. So now it's all hunky-dory. But we never got to see her actually like work through that trauma of being abused, and same with her eating disorder as well. We never actually got to see her work through that at all. It was just in the background, which again, I understand that people going through both of these things, like life does just continue to happen and it continues to move on. However, I feel like as an author writing a book has somewhat of a responsibility to discuss these issues or have these characters tackle these issues in a way where they end up not necessarily with a perfect happy ending, but even like the eating disorder that Allegra had was constantly mentioned, but it was almost encouraged by everyone around her. And same with like her mother and her had like such a toxic relationship, and then they had one conversation and everything was suddenly hunky-dory again. I feel like this book was trying to have so many things shoved into it that they managed to explore and develop none of it, including both of our characters. So quite a shame, because I especially love sport romances and I really thought that this one was going to be good, but I definitely do not recommend this one, especially if you are sensitive to any of the topics discussed as well, because I do not think that they are handled well. On that note though, we are going to take a little bit of a pause while I do some journaling. If you've never seen any of my wrap-up videos before, I love doing a little brief intermission of journaling where I journal my cover page, because I journal my cover pages at the end of the month. I know it's a little backwards, but it's just kind of what works for me. And then we'll do a flip through of the pages that I created throughout the month, as well as maybe discuss some of the events and things that I did as well. So let's go ahead and do some journaling, and then I'll come back and discuss the rest of the books. like I had mentioned, I did experience Summerween for the very first time, so I dove into a lot of genres that I don't typically pick up, but there was one book that actually kickstarted my desire for participating in Summerween, and that is Scythe and Pen. This is a 1920s Jazz Age inspired mystery story that has vampires, demons, vampire politicians, and I thought that this book was going to be so good, you guys, because I also thought that it was a standalone. Had I adjusted my expectations while going into this, maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but I thought it's a massive 500-page mystery novel, surely it's a standalone. And then we got 20 pages to the end, I was like, wow, we've literally gotten no answers to any mystery they set up. So this must be a part of a series. And it was, in fact, part of a series. I was enjoying this book for about the first maybe 150 pages. I really liked getting to know the characters and the politics and kind of like the push and pull of the different dynamics between all the characters. Basically, there is this vampires equal right bill that is about to pass. And just before the voting begins, there is a string of murders that start to occur that look like it is done by vampires, giving vampires a very, very bad rep at this point and jeopardizing the passing of this particular bill. We follow Demetrius as he is slowly trying to figure out who is basically doing these murders and what's going on with them, because there's a lot more than what meets the eye. There's a lot of interesting characters in this book, but I feel like about halfway through, we just lost all the development in these characters, and I just really stopped caring. The story also turned in a direction that I wasn't really expecting. Like I said, I was really excited for the mystery, and the mystery took a massive backseat during the second half of the book as we started following other character POVs that I just didn't really care about and really couldn't connect with. And by the end, I was just left with the overall feeling of like, where so much happened, but we got no answers to the original mystery. So obviously it's going to continue in the future books, which is fine, but you gave me no answers and only questions. So unfortunately, I will not be continuing the series, but I will say AC Hobbs is a phenomenal writer in terms of descriptions. She really does weave her words together in such a manner that is very, very immersive. So I really enjoyed the atmosphere of the book. All our locations and the characters' clothing and how it was described was so well done. But the character work and the pacing of the book definitely could have used some tightening up. I think if this book was shorter and it gave you a little bit more breadcrumbs to keep you more intrigued in the story, it would have been something I enjoyed a little bit more. One book that actually kind of surprised me with how much I enjoyed it so much was Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This book I honestly went into with lowered expectations because I am a scaredy cat when it comes to reading anything horror leaning. So having like a thriller book, I was like, ugh, okay, we'll see what's going down. But we are following a group of researchers that are basically trying to find killer mermaids. But we know from the opening of the book that researchers did go out and they did not return, and they were murdered by the killer mermaids. And so we're doing that again because apparently they never learn. This really is a book of, okay, money talks. Where's the money, right? The boat leaves port without the safety informations that everyone on the boat was promised existed. They did not work. You have millions of dollars poured into this boat, into this voyage, into getting all the people adjusted and on this boat and to set sail, right? So of course, greed rules all. Honestly, this really is a lesson about greed and nothing else. We follow a bunch of different characters throughout, and I really enjoyed how fast-paced everything kind of moved along because the anticipation was building the entire time because you know, characters are gonna start getting killed left and right eventually. And it really was so creepy and eerie about how the murders first started getting kicked off. I will say the ending was definitely more abrupt than I would have expected. It ended up being like everything fell into place perfectly for this one character and they saved the day. But all of the deaths were just so good. Like there was so much variation because I thought, oh, they're just gonna like come on board and start like killing everyone and like dragging them down. But there's a lot more like science behind it. Like, oh, some of their claws are like poisonous, things like that, little details. I just found really, really enjoyable. Yeah, I had a fun time. I don't really have any other books to compare this book to be like, oh, this is like the peak of thriller, because again, I don't really pick up books like this that often, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And it definitely has inspired me to maybe try my hand at a couple more thrillers. Maybe around like Halloween season, I'll give it a go. It's not my go-to genre at all, okay? I don't love being scared, but a book like this really fell up my alley unexpectedly. This next book, I had no idea what it was about, but it was a buddy read with Katie and Mackenzie during Summerween, and that is The Saturday Night Ghost Club. Club. Katie and I ended up listening to this book via audiobook together while doing some cozy fiber arting, and I just kind of felt about it, if we're being honest. We follow Jake and his eccentric uncle as they go ghost hunting, and they tell different stories, and it was just really a strange book in the beginning. And then the pieces kind of fell into place about what was actually going on. And then it was actually just really, really sad. I felt kind of meh about it overall. I didn't really go into it knowing what it was about or knowing what I was really getting into at all. And it's definitely a book outside of my comfort zone, I would say. It's not a book that I would have reached for on my own. But again, for Summerween, I just ended up listening to the audiobook with Katie. So I don't know, it was just kind of like an book. Like, I really don't have anything else to say about it. It was very mid, and that's kind of all I have to say. I feel pretty much the same way about Welcome to Dead House, which was a Goosebumps book. I used to read Goosebumps books as a kid, and I thought it would be fun to borrow Katie's Goosebumps books that she has and read one of them for Summerween. So again, books that I wouldn't usually pick up. And also, since it's like a elementary grade novel as well, or middle grade novel, it's not like I can have too many thoughts on it. It was interesting though. I didn't realize that this was the first Goosebumps book ever written in the Goosebumps series, but it was fun. It was creepy. It was, you know, it was middle grade. It was another kind of book to supplement my Summerween reading, pretty much. And then the last book that I want to talk about is actually a manga, and that was volume 7 of One Piece. My TBR prompt actually pulled, what was it? A book with water on the cover. So book 7 had water on the cover. This is the omnibus, so you can't really tell that it does have water on the cover, but I double checked the cover, and I mean, it has a sliver of water that you can see, but on the full cover, you can see more water. Doesn't matter. That's not the point. It was fun. It was fine. It wasn't like my favorite installment in the series so far, but I was happy to be back in the universe and finishing up this particular storyline. This was a conclusion of an arc, pretty much. I think the characters are pretty much like moving on from here. Or did I start volume 8? Wait, where am I? Wait, I don't remember starting this, but apparently I'm like 3 pages away from finishing volume 8. So that's fun. So I think volume 8 is actually what, wait, no, I'm confused. Hold on. Okay, no, volume 7 did wrap up that arc. Volume 8 did start a new arc. Okay, it's all coming back to me now. Sorry. I guess I don't remember continuing reading it, but then I'm looking at the panels and I'm like, oh no, like I did read most of volume 8. Not the point, doesn't matter. I really want to get back into my anime and manga mood. Like, I've been slowly picking at different series throughout the month, as you can kind of tell from my wrap-ups, but I definitely have taken a pause with like binging through a bunch of the volumes. I think I've just been busy, and I don't really bring manga on my flight attendant trips, but I think I'm gonna start doing that. Maybe I'll bring like a volume or 2 on my trips. That way I can get through a lot more at a quicker pace. But fun time. Wasn't like my favorite installment, but I am excited to continue on the series because we are introduced to Arlong in book 8, which is a very, very interesting arc. One that I did experience already in the live action in season 2, but I'm very excited to see how it's written in the manga. And that does wrap up all of the reading, all 10 books that I did end up picking up in the month of July. It's been an interesting month of reading, not what I expected when going into the month of July, if we're being frank, but it's nice to make TBRs, semi-follow them, and also leave some room for some mood readings. So I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on all of these. Let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me on any of my opinions on these novels, and also please let me know what you've been reading this month. I always love chatting books with you all. Please do also consider subscribing if you want to hear more from me, and I really, really hope to see you in my next one. Doodles!